Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and as always, it is freaking awesome to be with you guys on in this crypto space. There's no greater privilege than to be able to converse and interact with a great group of people who are trying to basically decentralize the banks, unbank the bank, as some people say. Guys, today I have some really big information to get through in terms of unpacking the discussion between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. It's pretty controversial, so strap yourself in, because what I've tried to do is try to look at the overall scope of the internet and Twitter, tried to have a bit more of an objective view, and I know that's really hard to do because we have investments in cryptocurrencies and blockchain. What I've tried to do is really unpack some of the big and core issues about the arguments, because there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of toing and froing, there's a lot of name calling, there's a lot of attacks going on, and I wanted to throw in my Satoshi's worth into this mix as well, because I really genuinely believe that the way through this is to actually look at the strengths that both Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash have to offer, because by doing so, it only strengthens Bitcoin as a whole. And I know that's really hard to hear because many people have strong positions, and I totally respect that. And please obviously leave your feedback below, because I always comment and respect on what you have to say as well, guys. So please don't think that I'm trying to suggest that I'm right. I'm not. It's just that I've tried to deduce my own findings, and I respect yours as well. So guys, the first thing I want to do is talk to you a bit about some of the key YouTubers that I found online that are willing to broach this topic. Now, the first one you can see here is Michael and from Box Mining, and also Crypto Daily. Now, they did a very interesting sort of skit. They were playing roles of Sergey, and that many of you who follow Crypto Daily will understand what I'm talking about. But basically, I guess what I wanted to broach here was that they were mocking, indirectly, they were mocking Bitcoin Cash. So this is really going to kickstart the argument, because whilst I have the utmost respect for both of these guys, and without them we wouldn't have much of the humor, much of the intelligent conversation about Bitcoin in the crypto YouTube community, it's important that we look deep into the implications of this kind of stuff and see where it's going to take it. So I'm going to allude to that through a Word document, but I just wanted to broach that this took place, and I did comment through the discussion. I thought it was really funny as well. Then you have Michael from Box Mining. He's talking in detail here about Bitcoin Cash flippening and the conspiracy. I won't go into it because it is his view, it's not mine, but it's important that we recognize that the magnitude of influence that happens through the YouTube space, because as you can see, nearly 30,000 people at that time had viewed this thing, and that's having an impact on people's perceptions, people's understanding, and people's potentially reactions in terms of investment. So I just want to make sure that we recognize the sentiment effect by posting these. The other person who's had nearly 17,000 views is Data Dash on this issue, and he's had many more, up to 60,000, and some other Bitcoin Cash related posts he's made. We've had some very direct discussions via his YouTube, and again, I have the utmost respect for Data Dash, and I have the utmost respect really for anyone who's willing to put their Satoshi's worth into the mix, because it's not easy to do. There's a huge backlash from certain groups when people do that, and I'm sure Data Dash knows what I'm talking about. But in this respect, the aim of my presentation here is really just to present different aspects of the argument so we can see, and also raise question marks when perhaps for conversation. In this instance with Data Dash, he really produced a lot of sentiment-focused reactions to the Bitcoin Cash pump recently. I found that very interesting, because generally he's a very level-headed, very ambivalent figure, and he does a lot of research. He's a very intelligent guy, but in this case he had a lot to say about his Bitcoin position, and again, he's a key influencer, so it's important that we recognize where each person sits and what their arguments are. And we'll talk about that at length in a moment. The next person, I've broached him before. His name is, he's well known as Crypto Love, so let's keep it at that. Basically, he was also addressing the issue, and where I'm getting to is they're talking about assets. So the big question we want to raise is Bitcoin an asset, or is Bitcoin a currency? Or is it something in between? And again, just like Data Dash, Crypto Love is advocating that it is an asset, and if you want to watch more of Data Dash's videos, you'll see that he regularly says in his recent posts that he regards Bitcoin as the ultimate asset, and that perhaps we should be discarding the original currency position because times have changed, and we're going to talk a bit about that in a moment. But again, Crypto Love is also saying here that he's questioning whether or not we should be looking at it as an asset. So it's really just food for thought in the crypto space and letting us unpack all the different perspectives. Now, many of you will know a fantastic YouTuber named The Crypto Lark. He does some excellent reviews, ICOs, he has a lot of commentary, very funny. But really why I wanted to include him in the mix because he's presented an argument that's a little different to Data Dash and some other previously mentioned YouTubers, in that he has sort of adopted Andreas Antonopoulos' view about it, looking at it more ambivalently. And you can see here from Andreas' post, he says Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash will coexist and serve different use cases. Just like Bitcoin and Ethereum, it is not a zero-sum game. And again, the Lark mentioned that in his video, and I wanted to also reinforce that with my own personal view, because Andreas has also posted things to the effect of BTC is BTC, BCH is BCH, and I'm going to show you some other viewpoints from leading influencers as well that perhaps may, encourage you to look more this way, because potentially it could actually strengthen Bitcoin and could strengthen BCH as well, if that's the interest, from those camps. The optimal outcome is everyone is advantaged by I guess by a stronger community, and that's, I guess, the crux of this YouTube that I wanted to create for you. The next thing is some tweets that I wanted to show you, and this one is very powerful, very recent. This was done by Vitalik Buterin, and I'll just read it to you. He says, okay, I'm going to just stop commenting on Bitcoin and issues almost entirely and focus on Ethereum tech. And the reason why is because it's been consuming the overall community. He says that I think the community needs to go through a lot of healing, and the firebends on all sides that are so sure that their side is righteous and the other evil deeply worries me. So the fact that Vitalik is getting on board and suggesting that there are sides at play, and they're potentially disaffecting the market, and they are certainly fracturing Bitcoin, it's very powerful, and someone as well positioned and as well respected as Vitalik is also getting involved, because his preference is not to do so typically. And I read a post today where he actually stated that he was preferred not to get involved, but he was risking a lot to even do so. But again, I respect Vitalik a great deal for doing that. The next thing, very quickly, Vinny L, if you're not sure, in many of his tweets recently, he's really been supporting this concept of Andreas, in that perhaps the argument is better looked at in that, as he said, if you don't like Bitcoin, go to Bitcoin Cash, and vice versa, but stop attacking each other. Again, there's a lot of a very, very strong sentiment no matter where we look, and if we can perhaps look through that and see the advantages of adopting a more neutral position, then I really do believe that not only from a technological position, but from an investment position, there's a much better prospects for both Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, whether or not we like the other side. And then we have Jihan Wu, who's a very interesting figure. We know he has a vested interest in Bitcoin Cash, but putting that aside, he's been objective enough in a subjective space to say things like, sorry, it's not actually in this post, but I'll just raise it for you anyway. Because the reason I put this one is he's actually trying to forewarn certain people about actions that are happening in BCH. But the real reason I put him here was actually for a separate tweet where he did post a similar sentiment to Andreas, and he said BTC is BTC and BCH is BCH. And for that reason, he was I included him. So on that note, what I've done is tried to design something that may help you in terms of understanding the power of YouTubers and Twitter tweets and key figures in the Twitter sphere. And the reason is that right through to an academic standpoint, I actually read a paper a lot about how sentiment affects the cryptocurrency market. These particular people and others I may have missed, they have a lot of influence with what they say. And if they have their own personal investments, their own personal sentiment inbound in what they're saying, then we need to address that. Not necessarily redress it, but look at it holistically, look at it realistically, and unpack the meaning of that. Because obviously, guys, you want to make money, you want to invest in things, and what I say is not financial advice. It's meant to be more educational and to support in this, co-educational space, because I'm no better, no worse, I'm no smarter, and it's not like that. It's just that we want to together, make the best informed decisions we can for ourselves. So in this, I've tried to divide it up into 4 parts. The first one is digital gold, the asset camp, because lot of the literature that I've read supports the idea that Bitcoin could either function as an asset or it could function as a currency. But there are certain camps within this, and you can see I've made the first one the pro-BTC or the anti-BCH. And through watching them carefully, these YouTubers, in my opinion, are very clearly pro-BTCH, and they've presented pretty clear and concise arguments for them, or they've mocked, the other side, whatever it is, but they've been quite vitriolic at times with regard to the differing blockchain. Now, here you can see these people include Michael from Box Mining, Data Dash, Crypto Daily. You can see Richard Hart's involved. Absolutely, he is very anti-BCH. Crypto Nick, I included him even though he's very ambivalent and very well researched. He stated recently that he wouldn't be involved with crypto with BCH. Jimmy Song, a very, very strong advocate for BTC. Crypto Love, again, as I said before, he's really made it clear he's pro-asset. And then there's the Dollar Vigilante, Tony Vase, Crypto Nick included, Charlie Lee, absolutely strong, got a vested interest for sure in BTC. Blockstream, of course, they are going to support BTC in its in whatever form, whichever SegWits we're talking about at the moment, because obviously the cancellation happened. We've got the Bcash crowd, those who want to do the B trashing. We've got Tur, we've got Adam Back, we've got the Digital Currency Group, and we've got CoinDesk. I included all of those because it basically they're prominent. They have, between them all, there's significant power and significant influence, and we need to recognize that because a lot of people are respecting and listening to what they have to say, so we need to categorize perhaps where their positions are. Then the next group, which I put myself in for my own my own perspective, is that what we call the gold and the cash camp, in that this group are advocating for BTC and for Bitcoin Cash to be recognized independently for the very different technologies and blockchains that they represent, and they have different aims as well. So these are the people that I've noticed in the crypto space that really advocate for perhaps this bifurcation. And these people are, I believe I'm trying to do that, but Andreas Antonopoulos is doing that, Vitalik is certainly encouraging that. The Crypto Lark, many of you, as I said, would have a lot of respect for him. He has a very open mind about this issue. He can foresee the value of both, and he's not suggesting that either side should simply close up shop, because again, listen to his argument, but I certainly did. Then you have the anomalous McAfee, or I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but very prominent figure. Was the original antivirus software designer, very popular among the crypto community. But yeah, John also is an advocate perhaps for the dual support, but certainly I've also put him in the pro-BCH as well. Then we also have Lewis Thomas. He is, advocating for a more open-minded approach, as is Crypto Bobby. Now, Crypto Bobby's made it clear he's not a big fan of attacking anyone. He wants people to recognize the power of, just getting on with the job, because ultimately, he's interested in the money-making aspect, and I respect that because that's really what most of us are there for. And then Crypto or Omar. Really interesting, very well spoken, strong representation in the crypto YouTube space. He also has taken a very objective view about this, and I respect him a great deal for that. Tika Tawari, contentious inclusion, but again, he's also consistently promoted BTC, and he's also promoting BCH at the moment with his private Palm Beach firm, Confidential. Jihan Wu, I've only put him here with respect to the way in which he's trying to respect both sides of the argument, even though he has a vested interest. He doesn't have to go and publicize that, but he is doing that. The Tapscott, Don and Alex, both are about trying to recognize the strengths of the cryptocurrencies within the bit space. Vinny Lingham consistently has advertised through his Twitter that he is trying to encourage people to recognize, again, the benefits of gold or slash asset and cryptocurrency slash cash of the two. Adam Back, I put him here only in that Only recently I read a tweet from him encouraging people perhaps to get on with the job, and also he recently was involved in a publication stating that he is considering increasing the block size of BTC or supporting that within the near future. So again, I put him there because that inadvertently would mean that he is supporting aspects of BCH's endeavours to try and evolve into the cash space somehow. Max Kaiser, a great ambassador within the media of cryptocurrency. He consistently posts about BTC, so in many respects he really does belong to the BTC camp, but he does interview people like Roger Ver, and he does that very objectively, I feel, and he seems to have a good relationship, so I put him there just for consideration. And I've also included some really well structured articles. These are not things that are sourced from places like Medium. Not that that's not a good source, but these are actually scholarly articles written by academics, and they were published. So I put them there to support these arguments of asset and of currency, and I'll show you some of them to you in a moment. The next category I want to talk about is the digital cash camp. Now, here you have the pro-BCH who tend to sort of argue for a complete flippening. And the number one person who's doing that is is definitely Craig Wright and Roger Ver. Now, Jihan is not arguing for a flippening by any means, but he is certainly pro-BCH internally, and also in terms of his own praxis. He's showing through his actions that he has a vested interest in trying to make sure that BCH becomes a strong, mainstay powerhouse in cryptocurrency. So Roger Ver, as you know, owner of Bitcoin.com, he was the first person to ever start a lot of the venture capital initiatives within the Bitcoin space. He was always a very strong proponent of Bitcoin. He will tell you that. He's well spoken. He's extremely charismatic. But at the end of the day, he is pro-BCH and anti-BTC. Craig Wright, the anomalous figure, very intelligent, no question he's involved in N-Chain. Some argue he is Satoshi. I don't care. I care that this man is very smart. I've spoken to him through Twitter. He knows, a great deal, and he's someone to take very seriously. He's also, very much involved as a senior stakeholder in, he has a senior role in N-Chain, which is a very, very prominent private research team. So again, these guys are to be taken seriously, and John also listed in this has recently started to post his position in that he's very pro BCH as well, and that's interesting because he has a vested interest in mining, which arguably would put him in both camps. That's why he's in both. Finally, you have one other argument, and that is that BTC is irreplaceable, and they kind of don't allude to anything more than that. They just focus on the fact that BTC is number one and we want to get on with the job. And Crypto Investor did one of the best YouTubes I have seen on this whole issue, and he articulated the power of BTC in terms of markets and how challenging that would be to change over BTC in those markets. It would require a universal and global action, and it would be a unified front that's unlikely to happen. So if you haven't seen his YouTube on this whole argument, it's absolutely friggin' awesome, and the reason why he has so many views on it is because of that. But I just thought, I hope this helps, because what I wanted to do is just really show a graphic of the power of these different camps, and recognize that perhaps we need to, rather than look at one side or the other, look more at the strengths of the digital gold offers as an asset, and look at the strengths. And I've certainly found really good quality journals that suggest that it is possible to do. Okay, so moving on, I just want to quickly get across to some key just to quickly go across to some arguments for and against the asset versus cash. I won't go into them, they'll be in the subscription links below. In the links below, and don't forget to subscribe or click the notification bell, guys, wherever it is, because that way you'll get my videos. But here, it's just showing you some referenced, researched pieces of information about the argument. So here you can see the debate about the asset, and it's proclaimed to be an asset, which means that it would move away from the original structures of the white paper. And again, I said this to Data Dash, it's not about having the argument and saying one is right or the other. It's just that we have to acknowledge the white paper, we have to look at it, and then look at and ask the question, okay, if I'm in a different camp, what to do? How do we redress this with some sort of alternative white paper? Because asset is entirely a potential, but it's not reflected in the white paper that exists today. So here you have Bitcoin and currency and asset. Again, some great articles that I'm really just trying to pique your interest in the question of asset and currency. Here's another one, Bitcoin, currency or investment. Again, this was coming from the Sydney Morning Herald. This article comes from Singing Alpha, Bitcoin as an asset class. So again, these are great articles to read, and I spent a lot of hours trying to find some of this stuff. So if you want to read through them, go for it. This one was interesting. It was a publication, and this was questioning whether or not Bitcoin was an asset or a currency. And you can see that at the very bottom, they explain their findings as well. But again, it's important for us to look for very research pieces because it'll help us inform our decisions. The next one, I just wanted to put in Bitcoin Cash again into this because Bitcoin Cash itself represents everything about the idea of cash. It's got nothing to do with asset in its premise. So let's move across to some of the articles that support, look at that again. So the Dean of Valuations, his argument is that it is a currency, not an asset. So now we're flipping over to this idea that it's a currency. And you can see that there's such strong mixed positions. I also want to throw this in here because, as I said before, Adam Back has recently stated, very recently in fact, that the block size increase could certainly happen and is possible later in the year. And I want to talk about that in the context of asset and currency, because if on the one hand you're saying that you're averse to what Bitcoin Cash stands for, which is currently an 8 mega block size, then perhaps you need to look at this a little bit more, because at no point is BTC, from my understanding through its core development and also through Blockstream, they're not saying that they are averse to that. They're currently trying to work out through the current climate within the internal stakeholders how they're going to do that. So that being said, that could also certainly push this further into the question mark of what is a currency and what is an asset in this space, because if this continues on, it looks like Bitcoin Cash and BTC are heading in the same direction. But for now, the classifications could very well be that we have an asset distinction, we have a cash distinction. So it's just worth knowing that this article is very fresh, and it's going to really incite a lot of it's going to really encourage a lot of debate. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about in the article, so I'll just scroll up and show you. This was one of the best academic journals that I found, or academic papers, and this title is Bitcoin, Asset or Currency, and it was brilliant. I'll have this just provided, but I just highlighted stuff so I won't waste your time. But essentially what it's saying is this, very powerful. It says, furthermore, the interpretation that Bitcoin is used as an asset is also supported by the fact that Bitcoin returns react on news events related to this digital currency. However, we find indications that Bitcoin users are limited in their level of professionalism and objectivity, which is highlighted by their bias towards positive news. Now that is the whole reason why I decided this video, that very quote, because I really do believe that. I think that there is so much hype sometimes, and there's so much bias within the market that actually affects investors' reactions. So I wanted to sort of get into the crux of it and open up this, this argument that's I think is an elephant in the room most of the time. It's supported by key researchers. In this article, they also went on and explained that they perceive Bitcoin to be a currency as well. It's just important that we get real about this and we unpack it and have a conversation. The next article or next journal was written by the Logistics University, came from a well-respected college of business, and their findings were also really similar. So if you want to check out that, it was well structured, well written, really interesting conclusion. But they concluded here that essentially they find that the return properties are very different from traditional asset classes. And essentially, if you go down, they talk about things like, since the size of Bitcoin investments and transactions can be characterized as small relative to other assets, we do not see an immediate risk. But again, they've really unpacked it as an asset class, and they've recognized that it could be validated as such. So I did read all these guys, and it is worth having a look at them if you're interested in that sort of thing. The next thing I want to talk about is centralization, because I'm copping a lot of flack for a comment I wrote to DataDash. And that's cool, I'll take that, because we are about free speech, and I respect everyone's view. But essentially, I wanted to I raised the question about centralization, because I've read so many comments recently about BCH being centralized, and whilst I don't disagree with that in any way, I raised the argument perhaps we're overlooking aspects of centralization, not just with BCH but also with BTC and many other cryptocurrencies or ecosystems. So on that note, sorry, I'll just put my coffee down. So on that note, I found some articles that really unpack the question of whether or not Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash have a degree of centralization, and the answer is simply yes, they do. Different degrees, certainly, but certainly it's important for us to be, as objective as we can. So these articles basically reinforce what I'm saying. They help us understand how centralization can be potentiated in these blockchains. So I won't go through them, but I just want to show you. And then I also wanted to show you the link with Andreas, because he actually talks about centralization of Bitcoin mining. So mining centralization in itself is an issue, and it needs to be redressed to install consumer confidence, but it does exist. And then the other thing I want to talk to you guys about here was exploring the centralization risk of Bitcoin. Again, the Lightning Network has potentially got some centralized aspects to it too, and we know that that's something that we're all proponents of, because we want to increase, the capacity of Bitcoin. That's an ideal thing, because any cryptocurrency that's going to enfranchise decentralization for overall consumers across the globe is great. But if it's going to come at the cost of some centralization, we need to know about that. And that's what I'm trying to present to you. It's hard for me to be objective. I won't lie, because I do have investments, but most of mine are not in Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. I will say that, and I really, so tiny, my interest at the moment in it from an investment standpoint. But from an educational standpoint, I have a very strong interest in Bitcoin Cash and in Bitcoin, because so many of us, want to try and profit. The next thing is Adam Back actually wrote about 3 forms of centralization that have crept into Bitcoin. So this article itself really evidences key aspects of centralization that do exist. And I'm not saying that, I'm not bashing any Bitcoin. I just wanted to highlight this information so you can access the research and really make an informed decision and look at the debate more robustly. So the other article I found was centralization is a problem for Bitcoin. It's time we stopped ignoring it. I agree that we need to stop ignoring it, but not just with BTC, but generally as a whole, we need to stop ignoring key aspects that can potentially strengthen our understanding and strengthen our way forward. And by acknowledging these things, perhaps we could build a better and stronger community like it used to be. As I've heard it in the original, time when everyone was just trying to move ahead in the decentralized crypto space. This one I wanted to also show you was a very, very interesting article that, again, it's an academic paper. It was about questioning whether or not Bitcoin is decentralized or not, and the findings were, it really highlighted aspects of it being having aspects of centralization. And I just found that it really valuable to help me understand my own position. And as you know from my own graph going back to this, is that my deductions are that I am in the Bitcoin and Cash camp. I support both. I do think that decentralization is vital, but I can also see that there are nuances of centralization by default in these currencies. So the next thing I want to show you, moving on from that, is going across to this article here. And this article was stated by a Harvard researcher, and his argument again was that Bitcoin has a highly centralized network. So many people will disagree. Sorry guys, camera just died. So what I'm trying to explain, guys, here by talking about this one is that there are 2 key sort of areas that this particular article from Merkle has talked about, looking at the primary priorities and the secondary priorities. So with Bitcoin, they're arguing that the main focus is on the quality of Bitcoin's public and permissionless blockchain and a censorship resistant, which is Richard Hart's buzzword. Their second priority is to, later on, as we've seen from Adam Back's post, is about enabling fast, cheap payments. So that's going to happen through things like the Lightning Network, which is great. We need to flip that because the prioritization for Bitcoin is a little different. They want to have fast transactions. They want to reduce the overall mempool, issues with all the backlog. They want to try and make sure confirmation times are faster, but they also want to make sure that, again, that it functions on a quality, permissionless public blockchain. So it's kind of like it's an argument of degree. And that's why perhaps we need to look less at the argument and the bifurcation and more about the strengths that each of them can offer, because their premise is really quite different. And one is talking about digital gold and one is talking about cash for the world. And yet that being said, many influencers, the people I've talked about before in the initial list, the pro BTC camp, they are advocating that. They are actually advocating for a move away from the idea of the white paper, which was to be a cash peer-to-peer system. So if that's something that many of the people want, then maybe we need to also redress that with some sort of white paper existence or some sort of document so people can distinguish between what this cash system's about and what this other this asset is, because there's just nothing, there's no actual white paper that represents the concept of an asset Bitcoin, even though it's actually happening. So again, not averse to it, but we need to really make sure we're clear. The next thing, quickly going through, is here's some more Bitcoin Cash successfully hard forks, and if you're not familiar with that, basically there was a back-end hard fork that happened. There was consensus, so it didn't split into two different coins, and there's also movement from that. There was on November the 13th, there was significant work done whereby now the hash rates and all that sort of thing will be actually much more aligned with mining support, and which will inadvertently mean that we should see some significant changes in BCH. Again, not financial advice, and I'm not advocating for either or, but the hard fork has an impact because it's now distinctly separated in some respects from BTC. Current Bitcoin Cash rally may push above certain price. You can see what you think about that. Trusted nodes. This was an interesting article. This just shows you how Bitcoin nodes rise to a new high as Bitcoin Cash prepares for its upgrade. Now that upgrade has now happened, and you can see that there's a significant change in the number of nodes that currently exist. So again, just food for thought. Interesting, may not be as current now, but Bitcoin Cash overtakes Bitcoin in hash rate. That did happen. It's now no longer the case at this point in time. But if you want to go and check out, I'll show you a site where you can constantly monitor that. But you can see from these two graphs that that was a major issue, and it was something that did definitely concern many people. Here's some more. Craig Wright, the person who is a very pro BCH person in the space. He's actually trying to push for a 1 gigablock, or is that, I think that's how you call it, but a 1 GB block to attain Visa level Bitcoin scaling. And I've actually conversed with him, and he argues that he is on track to do that. Many people would just want to discard what he has to say, but again, he has a significant voice. He has a senior role in nChain, and they are certainly making some gains. So I just wanted to broach that because BCH certainly are professing that they have significant scaling capacity. Some serious stuff has happened. At the moment, there's a lot of talk about mining being shut down in China. I'm not sure how much FUD that is involved in that statement, but certainly there are a lot of publications coming forth now to suggest that there's going to be a crackdown from China on mining, and that's going to have a significant impact in the overall market if that's the case. Also, Tika Tawari, he's a very well-respected person in America with his predictions, and he recently predicted that BCH is going to grow significantly, so that's interesting. And finally, I wanted to broach this article only because it was published by CoinDesk. And if you're not familiar with CoinDesk, they are part of the digital currency group. And as you may not be aware, that is also, they have direct links with Bitcoin. So in that respect, it's difficult for them to be objective because essentially this media has an intrinsic link with Bitcoin. So again, just to broach that, and it's really just to provide you with information so you can read through perhaps some of the read between the lines. This is interesting. This is what I want to show you. If you want to go to fork.lol, so fork.lol, this provides you with amazing analyses about things like fees and blocks and proof of work data. So if you want to, like for example, at the moment you can see the distinction between the fees between BTC and BCH. Now I'm not showing you this to encourage you to go to one to the other. It's just to show you the realities of what is actually happening, and the reasoning behind it is simply the differences in confirmation times, the mempool backlogs, the speed of transactions. That's the reason why these things are happening, and that's at a technological level. That being said, on a political level, which is really the driver of a lot of the investment and the angst that's happening, from a political position, many of the people in the pro-BTC camp, they're actually saying literally that people need to just ride the wave of cost, ride the expense, so that you can have a decentralized system. Well, as I was explained before, not everything's entirely centralized, and it's not black and white like that. And so for that reason, I'm arguing that I'm going to look after the people. I want to present the argument that, hang on, why don't we look at what's the most economical for investors, regardless of your own personal sentiment, whether you like one or the other. What about the people who've invested? We want to get the most out of their investment, so we need to make sure that we provide the information that's available so that people can get an informed decision of about how miners can switch. They can switch from one to the other to suit them. So why shouldn't we know about this, and why shouldn't we understand how that affects our choice of investment in time? The other thing is, if you want to check out TradingView, it's an excellent site to get some a better understanding on how markets work. It gives you good graphics with markets and trading. And lastly, blockchain.info, excellent site if you want to get some other key information as well. So guys, that's basically it from me. I've talked a lot, barely had any coffee, but I've really wanted to get that information out to you. I'm happy to send you all these links, but I really wanted to just address the question. I wanted to address the question of asset. I wanted to address the question of cash. I wanted to try and encourage people to move more as a collective, get together as a community, because strength in numbers, guys. And whilst there are distinct camps, it doesn't mean that we can't learn from each other. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been an absolute privilege as always, and I will talk to you very soon with a new video. Cheers. It's BlockchainBrad signing out.